Welcome to Echoes of My Imagination. My name is Tracy Lee. Sit back, relax. Let me tell you a story. Tonight's telling is not of one story, but several. Old Bardic threads gathered together, the way fires are banked for the night. The stories are meant to wash over you, to give your mind something beautiful to rest against. This is a compilation for listening, for resting, for remembering how it feels to be held by voice. Let's get into it. The quiet powers. She never called it power, not at first. It felt more like listening, like catching the wind in the middle of its breath, or noticing when someone's shadow flinched before their body moved. Let's get into it. Her name was Thompson, and she was a watcher. She saw things others didn't, the way fire flickered towards lies, how trees leaned towards sorrow, the invisible threads between strangers on a train. She never interrupted. She simply watched and quietly remembered. At 16, she stopped a car from hitting her brother, not by shouting or pulling him back, but by stepping forward. Time bent. The glass unraveled into light. Her brother blinked. The car passed through her like a fog through branches. She didn't tell anyone, not because she was afraid, but because she understood. The world wasn't broken, it was too full, and she was meant to carry some of it. As she grew, her gifts multiplied, but not in ways anyone else could easily see. She could move objects, but only if she knew their story. She could heal, but only wounds tied to grief. She could speak to animals, but only the ones who had chosen to trust her. Her powers did not roar, they listened. And in a world of noise, listening became her strength. She met Wesley on a train going nowhere in particular. He was quiet too, but not empty. His voice had the hush of rivers, and when he looked at her, her gifts quieted, not gone, just seen. They didn't speak of magic. They didn't need to. One night, a girl in the village vanished. A search party was formed. Thompson walked to the forest edge and waited. The trees told her nothing, but the wind remembered the girl's song. She followed it. She found the child wrapped in fog and memory beneath the circle of standing stones. She didn't break the spell. She offered her hand. And when the girl took it, the magic unraveled, not destroyed, set free. Thompson never wore a cape. She wore quiet boots, threadbare coats, and the scent of tea. But in the village they still speak of the girl who could walk into fire without burning. The woman who whispered truth into broken hearts, and the soul who taught them all that real power is not in force, but in presence, in knowing exactly when to step in and when to listen. The spell between their hands. It didn't start with thunder, or prophecy, or fate carved into stars. It started with a glance, a breath held too long, a touch that left a spark in the skin, the kind of love no one plans for, but that changes the shape of everything. Let's get into it. She lived alone at the edge of the fen, where the mist rolled thick and the reeds whispered in old tongues. Muriel was her name, soft-voiced, sharp-eyed, known for potions that healed bones, dreams, and reputations. She wanted nothing from the world, until Rowan Graves arrived. He came bleeding at the shoulder, hands trembling, a mark on his neck that shimmered gold under moonlight. She let him in, not out of kindness, but because the magic in his blood called to hers. When she stitched his wound, her thread glowed. When she pressed salve to his skin, her palms tingled. He looked at her like he'd known her for lifetimes, and said, "I dreamed you before I bled." They spent weeks in silence that felt like song, walking in fen, brewing herbs, reading from books written by hands long buried. One morning she found her tea boiling without flame. One night he lifted a fallen tree with nothing but breath. Their magic separate had always been quiet. Together it became wild. But magic like that echoes. The order of silence came for him, said his bloodline had awakened a forbidden power centuries ago. They gave Maelis a choice: bind him, bury the power, or lose everything. She chose neither. The order came with ash in their mouths and chains laced with spellfire. Maelis stood before Rowan and cast a spell older than names, woven from love, blood, and bone. It didn't destroy the order. It made them forget. Rowan held her hand as they vanished into fog, and when the mist cleared, they were gone. They live now where the fen meets the forest, in a cottage no one can quite find. Those who are kind or wounded or lost sometimes stumble upon it, and when they leave, their pain is softer, their steps lighter, their hearts steadier. Because inside that house, two souls still live a love so strong it became spellwork, and some magic once made never fades. It only deepens. The silence beneath the stair. Some secrets do not want to be uncovered. They live in shadows, in doorways no one sees, in the hush just before a child asks a question they shouldn't. And once, in a house by the sea, a girl kept one. Let's get into it. Imogen Blythe lived in a cliffside manor that creaked like a shipwreck. Her father a judge with ink-stained hands, her mother an invalid who stared always at the sea. Imogen rarely spoke. She sketched spirals on the backs of hymnals and whispered lullabies into locked drawers. In the east wing between the library and the linen room was a stair that went nowhere. 5 steps, then a wall. No one used it. Imogen swept it every morning, humming, and sometimes left letters beneath the 3rd step. She wrote to someone who never wrote back, about dreams with eyes like candle flame, about voices in the wallpaper, about a name that made the windows rattle, Asmere. When the housekeeper found one of the letters, she burned it without reading. But the house groaned all night, doors swung open, the stair pulsed, and Imogen woke with a mark on her palm, spiraled like her sketches. One autumn a storm stranded a scholar from the university in the manor. His name was Declan Vere, curious, kind, dust-stained. He noticed the stair, and one night he saw Imogen step through the wall. She returned minutes later, her eyes rimmed in silver. He asked nothing, but the next day left a letter of his own beneath the 3rd step. Imogen smiled. There was a room behind that wall. It didn't always exist, only when the house needed to hide something, a memory, a spell, a soul. Imogen was its keeper, and Declan its first guest. He stayed for months, and when he left, he no longer limped. He no longer dreamed in Latin. He no longer feared silence. Imogen vanished the winter she turned 30, left behind one journal filled with symbols that pulsed under moonlight and a key. It didn't open any lock in the manor, but once a year, a child finds it in their coat pocket and hears a whisper near old stairs. Some secrets are not lies, they're promises. The flame she found within. No one saw the power in her at first. She was too quiet, too kind, too invisible. But some flames don't roar, they rise in silence. Let's get into it. Mela Doone worked at a shop that sold dust-covered books and expired herbs. She made tea no one drank and smiled at people who never looked up. She didn't argue, didn't ask, didn't expect. But when she walked home each night, her fingers burned. Not in pain, in want. Something inside her wanted out. It began on her 29th birthday. The power went out citywide, storm clouds gathered with no wind, and lightning struck the same weather vane 3 times. She was alone in the shop, and the books opened themselves. Pages flipped. One stopped on a symbol, her birthmark, exactly. A spiral with a flame in its core. The door locked itself, and her voice, one she had never used in full, spoke the name written there. The world didn't shatter, she did. Split open like seed to soil. Suddenly she could hear people's truths, not their words, their frequencies. Her hands glowed when she touched something broken. Her eyes saw the pulse of roots beneath pavement. Fear came first, then silence, then choice. Mela didn't run, she stayed. Each day she spoke what others avoided. Each week she helped one stranger see themselves fully. She made tea again, this time with herbs that remembered how to heal, and she wrote. Spell-laced words hidden in poems, and notes slipped into book jackets. Those who found them woke with courage, and did things they once feared. Someone tried to stop her, a man in a gray coat, cold voice, old magic. He warned her, "You're disrupting the quiet." She looked him in the eye and said, "Then let it burn." The shop still stands, ivy-covered and warm. The tea is never bitter. Strangers come in bruised and leave lighter. And sometimes, when no one's watching, a flame flickers just above the door, a spiral turning in slow, radiant grace. Not a warning, a welcome. Because Mela didn't find power, she remembered it. And once a woman remembers who she is, there is no stopping the flame. The mirror at Wintermere. The glass arrived wrapped in oilcloth, its edges kissed with tarnish, its frame carved in symbols no one could read. No note, no sender, just a word etched faintly across the bottom in silver leaf. Wintermere. Let's get into it. Iris Greaves had been restoring antiques for 17 years. She trusted in things others ignored, glue, grain, silence. After her divorce, she'd sworn off mysteries, until the mirror. She touched it once, and dreamed of snow falling upside down. It didn't reflect quite right. When she moved, the glass seemed to wait before responding. Her eyes lingered in it a moment too long. And at night, if she left the door ajar, a hum came from the cloth-wrapped pane. Low, melodic, familiar. The mirror was old, but the presence in it, not aged, just watching. On the 4th night she saw him, not behind her in the glass, tall, with eyes like frozen peat and a mark along his jaw that flickered like moth wings. He did not move. He waited. When she turned, no one was there. But when she whispered, "Who are you?" the mirror clouded with frost and cleared with the words, "You knew me once." Each night she unwrapped the mirror, sat before it, lit a candle. He began to speak, not with sound, but with memory. Visions curled in the glass like steam on breath. 2 figures walking through snowbound ruins, fingers grazing, eyes knowing. She saw herself, but not as she was, as she had been, centuries ago. Her friend begged her to let it go. "It's haunted," they said. "It's hollow. You're losing yourself." But Iris only smiled, because for the first time in years she'd felt seen, until the mirror cracked, just once. A thin fracture across the man's heart. That night she saw a memory she didn't want, a betrayal, a fire, a hand reaching for help and finding cold. Her hand. She could have turned away, but the mirror pulsed and she knew it was not about regret. It was about redemption. She placed her hand to the glass and said, "I remember now." And it opened. Not into another place, but into another chance. The mirror still rests in her cottage, whole again. Visitors who gaze too long swear they see someone else in there, someone familiar. But Iris, she tends her garden, writes in a new language, wears a ring shaped like frost. And once a year, when the snow falls silently sideways, she opens the curtain wide and dances with the man in the mirror, because some love is not bound by time, only memory and choice. The Inkbone Scribe. Some stories are told, some are sung, some are bled into bone. This is one. Let's get into it. Born in the city of Skinscript, in the desert capital of Ka-Terev, where sand sang through obsidian ruins and wind etched glyphs on cliffs, a child was born during the eclipse of both moons. His name was Avon. The midwives marked his birth as a twin-veined omen, a sign that he would walk between visible and invisible truth. Black birthmarks spiraled down both of Avon's arms, forming patterns no one recognized. At 2, when the family's scribe spilled ink on a sacred scroll, Avon toddled over, traced the broken letters with his fingers, and the text reformed. It reorganized itself into something older. The elders whispered, "He carries ink in his bones." By 6, he was apprenticed to the Temple of Scriptsblood, where monks learned to bind memory into the body through the sacred art of Inkbone Scribing, a fusion of tattoo, memory, blood ritual, and ancestral glyph work. Unlike ordinary tattoos, Inkbone scripts bled when truth was spoken, faded when history was forgotten, and shifted shape when someone lied. Each line was sacred geometry. Each curve contained a vowel. Each dot could unlock an emotion. Most scribes spent 10 years mastering the first pattern. Avon completed it in 6 months. But he didn't stop there. He began inventing new ones. At 12, while mapping his own lineage across his spine, Avon uncovered a memory that wasn't his. A woman running through fire, a child left behind, the smell of rose ash. No record of this ancestor existed. He inked the scene across his ribs. When an elder saw it, they dropped to their knees, recognizing their own great-grandmother's final hour. From that day forward, people sought him out, not to record history, but to find what had been lost. Each time he touched skin and inked it, the forgotten stories awakened. Some screamed, some wept. One old woman died smiling as he completed the sigil behind her ear. By 20, Avon had become known as the archive of the flesh. He no longer carried scrolls. He was the scroll. His body was covered in thousands of micro-stories. A child's final lullaby in the curve of his thumb. A king's betrayal winding down his thigh. A prophecy still unread across the soles of his feet. He walked barefoot through cities. Barefoot through grief. Barefoot through joy. People reached out not to touch him, but to feel the words beneath his skin. At 27, Avon began the ritual of Inkbone Reversal, a rite where one must tattoo their final story into their own bones, using ink mixed with ground memory glass and blood. The ritual took 9 days. He did not eat. He did not sleep. By the 9th night his hands trembled. He had reached the end of his femur and was about to scribe the final line. Instead, he stopped. He looked up and said, "Some stories must remain unwritten." He placed the final drop of ink on the ground. Where it landed, a wildflower bloomed, in the shape of a letter no one could read. Avon's body was never buried. It was wrapped in golden silk and suspended in the Hall of Remembering. Once each year, a single person is allowed to place their hand against the silk and receive a single memory from Avon's ink. Sometimes it's theirs. Sometimes it's someone they forgot. Sometimes it's a future that never happened, but still matters. It is said that the bones beneath the silk glow faintly now, and one day, someone will finish the line he left empty. The Spirit Walker of Veilwood. Before the world was bound by borders and laws, there existed a realm stitched between breaths, known only as Veilwood. In this liminal forest where light bent in strange angles and rivers whispered names no map had marked, a child was born during the final eclipse of the age. They named her Merrin. Merrin's birth was marked by a storm with no clouds and stars that refused to blink. Her mother, a wild-hearted herbalist, claimed Merrin had opened her eyes before her lungs had filled, choosing to witness before choosing to survive. Merrin grew surrounded by both wonder and wariness. As a child, she conversed not with people, but with mushrooms, moss, and wind. Her companions were shadowy forest spirits and flickering lights that danced along the bark at night. The village midwives whispered that she was touched and never quite said what they meant. One morning, at age 5, she wandered deep into the woods and returned with a scratch across her cheek and a single silver scale clutched in her hand. "It was lonely," she said, "so I sang to it." By adolescence, Merrin could vanish into mist. She could find lost children by whispering their names into running water. Her closest friend was a raven that never cawed, only blinked 3 times for yes and once for no. She called him Grin. At 16, she entered the Forbidden Hollow, a place others spoke of only in warnings, and returned riding atop a great, sinuous creature with emerald eyes and horned elbows. A dragon. Long thought extinct or imaginary, its name was Sayarun. But Merrin had not summoned it. She had released it from a sleep of centuries. In return, it bound its spirit to hers, not as servant to master, but as kindred beings. From that day forward, the veils thinned. Spirits began to pass freely, seeking Merrin out. She created paths between realms with chalk, song, and old bone. Her presence turned grief into reunion. She brokered peace between ancestors and descendants, between flame spirits and forest elementals. The people of Veilwood did not understand her, but they began to rely on her. She was called Spirit Walker, Rift Keeper, the Hollow Bride. And then, as all stories turn, she disappeared. It is said she left in winter, barefoot, her footprints steaming against the snow. Sayarun flew overhead once more, and then both were gone. No body was found. No grave was built. But the borderlands of Veilwood changed that year. The forest began to speak again. Children born since claimed to dream of a girl with eyes like the moon and a dragon made of stormlight. She asks no questions in these dreams. She only whispers, "Remember." And then they do. Exile of the Flamebound. They didn't run. They withdrew like a tide returning to its source, not out of fear, but for the gathering of power. Let's get into it. The night they left, no one saw them go. Elira and Kaelin walked beneath a moon veiled in stormlight, each footfall drawing warmth from frozen ground. No carriage, no herald. Only a crow followed, silent. They didn't speak until the trees thickened and the wind lost its name. Then she whispered, "I thought exile would hurt more." And he said, "It isn't exile if you walk into it together." The forest beyond the known maps had no name, only sound. Cracking ice, low thunder from beneath the snow. But as they walked deeper, something changed. The cold stopped biting, the light turned older, and the land began to respond. The trees turned to face them. Stones stirred beneath moss, and fire danced in Kaelin's hands without flame. Their bond, no longer watched or feared, unfolded. She could now summon memory from earth itself, laying hands to tree bark and feeling the whole history of its roots. He began hearing voices in the wind, not madness, but echoes of ancestors who carried the same twin flame line, guiding, teaching. They weren't learning magic. They were becoming it. It was not built, it was found, half buried in ivy, breathing warmth from within. The door opened when Elira placed her palm against the wood. Inside, dustless, quiet, waiting. A hearth lit itself, shelves filled with books in languages they'd never learned, but understood. This place had known them, but not just in this life. Elsewhere kingdoms rose and fell, but across the veil in quiet corners of the magical bloodlines, people spoke of the two who chose each other over empire, whose fire was not wielded, but honored. They didn't raise armies, they raised frequency. Those attuned to truth could feel them, in dreams, in meditation, in the sudden stillness between thoughts. Twin flame, soul bond, flame bound. Names didn't matter. Presence did. There is a story told by northern shamans that a pair lives beyond the ice in a realm where the stars bend low enough to kiss the trees. That if you arrive there and your soul sings in harmony with another's, you'll be guided to a fire that never dies. They don't speak. They don't interfere. But if you look into that flame, you will see them. Elira and Kaelin, still holding hands, still choosing each other, every lifetime. The Ember Caller. Some lives wait to be lit. Others are born already burning. This was one. Let's get into it. He was born the day the great Everhearth went cold, an ancient fire said to have burned without pause for 1,000 years, in the mountain stronghold of Tessaloon. As the flames flickered into silence, a newborn cried. His skin was marked with ash-like patterns from elbow to fingertip, a grayish lattice that smudged and shifted with heat. His mother, a fire tender, whispered, "You're what the fire gave us before it left." They named him Kael, meaning Emberborn. He never feared fire. By age 2, he had crawled into a hearth, touched embers, and emerged unharmed, just warm, eyes glowing amber. By 7, Kael could hear fire, not crackling, but words, in flickers, in rhythm of dancing light. He claimed that each flame had a memory, and each memory had a feeling. A cooking fire felt like love and fatigue. A ceremonial torch pulsed with duty and dread. Wildfire screamed. He listened to them, and sometimes they listened back. Once he calmed a burning orchard by holding a single torch and speaking to it gently for hours. The fire stopped just before it reached the village. From then on, they called him the Ember Listener. At 12, Cale was taken to the Guild of Fire Callers in the volcanic basin of Varan Hollow, where only those born with flame marks could train. There he learned how to breathe with flame instead of against it, how to feed fire only what it hungered for, emotion, not just fuel, and how to hold sorrow in his palm and coax it into a flickering blue flame that could guide lost spirits home. Most struggled. Cale thrived. His flames did not consume. They communed. One elder said, "He's not a fire starter. He's a memory igniter." At 21, Cale began his pilgrimage of sparks, a journey to relight the 7 silent flames scattered across the forgotten lands. Each flame had once burned to protect a realm of sacred memory, now darkened by war, silence, or time. Cale lit them one by one. The river lantern that remembers every child lost to the current, the blade candle that once honored soldiers who dropped their sword, the cavern wick that only burns when you speak a secret you've never said aloud. Each lighting brought tremors, dreams, mourning. People remembered things they didn't know they'd forgotten. Cale never flinched, but his eyes grew heavier with each flame. Only one remained, the mirror pyre, a flame that, when lit, showed you your truest self, not what you believed you are, but what you really carry. Most who tried to light it fled. Some went mad. Cale stood before it, torch in hand. The flame refused him at first. Then he whispered, "Show me everything. I burn to become this." The pyre flared and wept. It burned not in front of him, but within him. His skin ignited, yet didn't char. His marks turned gold, and the mirror pyre, dormant for centuries, returned to life. He did not scream. He sang. Cale vanished after the pyre lit. Some say he became fire itself. Others claim a single ember from his hand rests in the center of every ceremonial flame across the realms. In distant towns, children born with ash-marked arms now speak to candlelight. They call themselves the Ember Callers. And when they gather around fire, they often hum a tune none of them were taught. It matches the rhythm of the mirror pyre's first flame, and always ends the same way. What was lost will burn warm again. The Stone Vaultkeeper. Some carve their names into stone to be remembered. Others carve stone itself to remember the world. This was one. Let's get into it. In the gorge-ridden plateau of Eros Thal, where stone canyons sang low tones when the wind passed just right, a child was born into silence. Her name was Nellie. She did not cry. She did not blink. She stared. At a wall of stone above the birthing hollow, her eyes reflecting its texture like it was already known to her. Her people called her Tava Vale, child of the strata, for her skin bore gray bands across her chest and limbs like sediment rings. When she touched rock, it hummed. When she placed her ear to stone, she listened for hours. She said it told her things. At age 5, Nellie began to chip shapes into pebbles and cliff walls. Not images, frequencies. She said the shapes made the rocks sing truer. Adults watched her hammer away patterns into canyon walls. The next rainfall, water streamed down those same patterns and formed new rivulets where springs had long dried up. She had unknowingly remapped the aquifers. The elders marked her as a memory chanter, one who remembers with stone. By 9, Nellie was brought into caverns of the deep delvers, the memory keepers who recorded history in stone frequencies, a tactile script that, when traced, vibrated softly and conveyed not words, but emotion and sequence. There she learned to sculpt emotion into texture, to read the grooves of a broken era by hand alone, to carry stories without speaking them. Her gift was rare. She could carve backwards, starting at the emotional conclusion and working back toward the cause. It made her dangerous to the forgetting. At 14, Nellie was granted entrance into the vaults of echoes, chambers where stone records were guarded and released only in dream state. Most required days of fasting to enter trance. She fell into echo sleep instantly. Inside, she witnessed the eruption of the first mountain, the migration of the sky crafters, a child herself, carving a story she had not yet lived. The stone had showed her a future memory, and when she awoke, her fingers were stained with silver dust. Only one other in history had been marked so. At 20, while carving a memory spire for the mourning of a forgotten war, she paused. The stone beneath her hand trembled. It split. A deep crack roared through the canyon where no quake had been. In its wake, a previously sealed stone heart chamber was revealed. A dome of obsidian etched with stories no one remembered writing. At its center was a seat, formed for her. She sat. The chamber pulsed, and in that silence she received the memory of the land itself, the sorrow of the broken crust, the birth of caverns, the molten blood beneath it all. She wept until her tears left white streaks on her cheeks, permanently. Nellie never returned to the village, but the people of Arlos Thal still hear her. When the wind moves through the stone heart chamber, it speaks in chords. Pilgrims come from all regions to sit there. They say the stone touches your back and speaks not in voice, but in truth feel. Some walk away with a memory that isn't theirs. Some remember what their ancestors forgot. Some fall to their knees and carve their own name for the first time. And some say that late in the twilight, a girl with sediment-ringed skin can still be seen walking barefoot, humming stone tones to the cliffs. She carries no tools. She is the tool. And the land remembers through her. The Sky Reader of Muriel Voss, where the clouds told stories before ink was ever born, and those who listened could rewrite fate with their breaths. Let's get into it. The land of Muriel Voss contained the city of Aether scrolls. Muriel Voss floated, half in air, half in reflection. It was built along the wind-cut plateaus of a forgotten continent. The city rested on sky bridges, featherstone towers, and anchors carved from meteor bone. Below it hung the mirrored lakes of Veilwood, which reflected the city with such clarity that even clouds could read their own shapes. Murielians were a people of watchers, observers of sky pattern, readers of aether motion. They believed that clouds carried time and that reading the sky was reading one's soul in motion. The highest calling amongst them was the sky reader, trained to interpret vapor trails, updraft curls, lightning scrawls, and dew glints as divine script. But there had not been a true sky reader in over a century, until a child was born to storm-swept silence. They called her Sivra, meaning thread of the rising wind. She was born during a rare skyfold when 3 storm systems layered perfectly over Muriel's apex temple, forming a spiraling dome of cloud, lightning, and a soft rain that hummed with low, ringing tones. Her mother gave birth beneath this dome. No one witnessed it except a hawk with one feather burning blue. The child emerged with eyes cloud gray swirling. Her first breath came with a sound like distant thunder. She never cried. She simply listened. From infancy, Sivra responded only to sky shifts. She giggled when mist arrived. She went still when shadows passed. She would not feed unless light flickered through the clouds just so. By age 5, she could predict storms with uncanny accuracy. By age 9, she could write and do. At 13, she walked to the edge of the mirror bastion, where the first sky reader once stepped off, and simply sat, eyes upturned, for 3 days. She returned with the sentence, "The clouds say time is a fractal. You just forgot how to breathe with it." The elders called her Sky Reader, though she never once claimed the title. Sivra learned to speak rarely and only in wind patterns. She kept a scroll of silks not to draw on, but to catch condensation. Each thread told her something different. Direction was a mood. The temperature meant intention. Speed equaled urgency, and shape was probability. She believed clouds were soul maps of the living, that your inner conflicts made turbulence in the troposphere, that to read sky was to reflect the collective dreaming. People began coming from far beyond Muriel Voss to sit beneath her perch and ask for a forecast of the soul. She never answered directly, she simply looked up. Sometimes she would hum. Sometimes she would write a shape in the air with her fingers. Sometimes a storm would arrive behind her and leave clarity in its wake. One year, the skies dimmed. A smoke veil drifted from distant volcanic lands, choking the clouds and hiding all pattern. For Sivra, this was like losing all language. She went silent. The wind did not listen. The water refused shape. In this quiet, she began climbing to the highest perch, the breath point, a needle summit used only for mourning. There she fasted for 7 days, refusing water, closing her eyes. On the 7th day, as the veil began to crack, she exhaled a single breath. The smoke split, the wind returned, and with it, new clouds. But now they swirled in mirror spirals. Something had changed in the structure of the sky, and Sivra whispered, "Now the sky writes in reflection." She was no longer just reading, she was co-writing. On her final day, Sivra climbed again, this time without scroll, staff, or robe. She stood atop the mirror bastion as a ring of lenticular clouds spiraled above. She spoke one word, anchor, and then stepped off. Her body was never found. But in the lake reflection, a second Sivra appeared, smiling, writing in ripples. The city declared her ascended. The clouds have never returned to silence since. The Sand Eater's Song. Some eat food to survive. Some eat silence to pray. But this one, he ate pain to cleanse the land. Let's get into it. There are deserts that whisper, and there are deserts that sing. The Atrix wastes did both. It was a place where winds sliced the dunes into harp-string ridges, and entire melodies rode the gusts between stone teeth. Travelers reported hearing lullabies in languages they didn't know. In this place, during the longest windstorm in half a century, a child was born to a nomad mother who walked until the blood dried on her heels. No tent, no fire, no witness but the storm. She gave birth in the crook of a sandstone spine and named her child Salin, a word meaning last breath before silence. But she did not survive the storm. The baby did. The dune took her body, the wind wrapped the child, and from that moment on the sands never harmed Salin. Salin was found by the Kar Mon, desert monks who lived in silence atop the cliff monastery of Zen Yal. They believed sound was a form of worship, and silence was the most sacred sound of all. But when they brought Salen to their temple, something strange happened. The sacred bells, hung for centuries in utter stillness, rang, not from touch, from tone. The child's breath made them chime. The monks raised Salen with reverence and distance. He learned how to speak in wind bursts and whistle tongue, how to hear movement in the echo of grain shifting, how to locate life by the temperature of sand. But what he learned most deeply was how to eat memory. In Atric's myth, there were once desert children who could consume the residue of pain, death, and loss left behind in the ground. Sand eaters. They were both feared and revered, useful during war, unsettling during peace. By 17, Salen had become one. When a traveler died unshriven in the dunes, the monks sent Salen. He would kneel beside the bones, press his lips to the sand, and inhale, and the sorrow would leave the earth. Sometimes he wept afterward. Sometimes he sang in a voice not his own. He began to carry these echoes. Some never faded. Some nested in his ribs like birds waiting to sing again. At 20, Salen began the pilgrimage of loss, a solo journey across every known burial dune and ruin site in the eastern half of Atrix. It lasted 3 years. He walked through villages abandoned after sand sickness, oases cursed with saltfowl, war grounds where bones still clutched weapons. And in each place he sat, listened, inhaled, and sang. His voice became a thing of legend. Some said it could make dying camels lie down in peace. Others said it caused a grieving mother to miscarry her grief. One tale claimed his singing made a city wall crumble, revealing a hidden ossuary of murdered servants. By the end of his pilgrimage, the sands where he had walked grew softer. Children could play there again. Upon returning to Zenyal, Salen found the monastery empty, not destroyed, not abandoned, just hollow. No footprints, no sounds, no offerings. Only a single bell ringing, struck by wind. He walked the halls, sang to every doorway, listened to the echoes. Finally, in the hall of breath, he placed his palms on the central altar and exhaled. The sound was not his. It was theirs. All of them. The monks, their final prayers, their farewell breath. He had been away too long. So he sat. He sang them into the wind. He placed his name on the wind and released it. From that day, Salen's name was never spoken again. He became simply the wind's mouth. Travelers in the Atrix wastes still speak of sudden cool breezes on hot days, breezes that sing in minor chords and leave no footprints behind. Sandstorms will part suddenly around lone travelers. Bones once uncovered will vanish overnight. Children, lost in the dunes, are found cradled in wind-carved alcoves, humming lullabies. And if you listen near the dune called Last Breath, you may hear a single, unbroken note, the voice of one who swallowed pain and left only peace. The Seed Keepers Vow. Some people plant for harvest. Others plant so the past will never starve. This was one. Let's get into it. She came from the bones of a burned orchard. The fire had taken the trees, the roots, the birds, the grain stores, and all 4 corners of the farmstead. But when the ash cooled and the rains came, something stirred beneath what should have been ruin. A child, wrapped in damp burlap, buried to the neck in soot-rich mud, eyes open, unblinking. They named her Tela, meaning again. She grew up in Vale, a scarred basin of earth where burned-out towns became gardens, and old women muttered to seeds before planting. It was said Tayla never cried, but when she touched seeds, they pulsed, even the dead ones. Her adopted mother called her ground-born. Others whispered, the girl who came up, not down. At 9, Tayla began her training as a keeper. An old, nearly forgotten class of earth tenders responsible for holding memory in seed form. Keepers did not garden for food. They gardened to remember. Each plant in their charge grew only once every lifetime. They called these memory crops. Under the tutelage of Grandmother Aish, Tayla learned to listen for seed dreams while sleeping with them under her tongue. She learned how to decode soil tremors during windless nights, and to identify which seeds remembered love and which carried grief. Tayla was a prodigy of remembering. Her soil beds never required watering. Her seedlings emerged in strange geometries, spirals, labyrinths, starbursts. She said she wasn't planting. She was returning things. When Tayla turned 15, a great blight swept the land. Not pest or mold, a silence of the soil. Nothing sprouted. Fields across the continent cracked open. Fruit trees bled amber. Livestock refused to eat. The scholars called it the starvation spiral. The common folk called it soil death. In Vale, as families fled or wept, Tayla stayed behind. She walked into the heart of the dead fields and sat for 3 days. Then she began to dig, not down, sideways. She unearthed a labyrinth of seed vaults, ancient and circular, made of root bone and whisper wood, the forgotten works of long-dead keepers. Inside were hundreds of sleeping seeds, each preserved in wax glass pods, but they were inert. Until Tayla bled on them. Her hand, pricked on a bramble thorn, left a smear of blood on a glass pod, and the pod pulsed. She fed them memory, and they awoke. Tayla made a vow beneath the root light. So long as I live, the hunger shall not win. So long as I breathe, the earth shall remember. And if no one else will carry this memory, I will plant it myself. She marked the words into her skin, carved with blackberry thorns and rubbed with soil from each vault she awakened. The script wasn't decorative, it grew. Her veins darkened where the vow entered. A lattice of creeping green appeared beneath her skin. She had become a living keeper vault. Tayla replanted the memory crops in hidden spirals across the land. Not in fields, those could be raided. Not in gardens, those could be burned. But in unlikely places, inside mossy wellstones, in the undercrofts of broken cathedrals, beneath hearths in ruined taverns, within the bone marrow of long-dead cattle. She created a root web of remembrance, a mycelial archive of humanity's hungers, stories, and recoveries. And when people despaired, the crops began reappearing. They grew overnight. Tomatoes with ancestral flavor, corn with singing husks, peppers that glowed when held by grieving hands. No one knew where they came from, but many whispered, Tayla has walked here. No one knows where or when she died. Some say she became tree. Others say she dissolved into soil. But her name became a prayer, not for food, but for memory that refuses to die. In the garden beds of orphan homes, children now bury handwritten fears in seed form and call the sprouts Taylas. And when famine looms again, someone always finds a seed beneath their tongue, still warm, waiting. The Firelit Witness. Some fires are lit to burn. Some are lit to remember. This was one. Let's get into it. In the crater-ringed highlands of Southern Hollow, a fire burned that never went out. No one knew when it began. No one remembered who lit it. But the villagers all agreed. It watched. It was called the Witness Flame. People were buried near it, not for warmth, but so they might be seen one last time by something that remembered. It was by this flame that Calrin was born, not near it, inside its glow. The midwife said the flicker left a mark in his eyes, tiny golden rings that reflected light even in shadow. His mother, a blind priestess named Vera, whispered to the flame during labor, "Give him only what he can carry. Let his burden break curses, not his back." The flame flared once, and Calrin did not cry. He stared directly into the fire. By age 5, Calrin wandered the village at night, not sleepwalking, just drawn. He'd stop at windows where parents fought quietly and just watch, not judging, not afraid, just witnessing. It unsettled people. They said he saw things too plainly, said the flame had peeled his inner skin so he could feel what others hid. He rarely spoke, but when he did, it was truth that made people flinch. "You buried your anger in her hair. He leaves because you forget he exists when you pray. She breaks dishes, so she won't break." These weren't insults. They were observations. He didn't know how not to say them. At 10, a passing caravan brought a traveling mystic who recognized the rings in Kaelin's eyes and named them witness bands, marks given by certain sacred fires to those destined to remember things others suppress. "You don't just see events," she said. "You hold the echoes they leave in people's bones." The village elders debated what to do. He wasn't dangerous, but he was disruptive. He made hidden things visible. So they trained him. He learned to read flame flicker patterns, which reflected not heat, but emotion. He learned to pour wax trails that mapped where energy gathered in a house. And he learned to seal memories into charcoal. By 12, he was brought to funerals to see what was unsaid, to fields after storms to hear what the crops feared, to confessionals, to burn forgotten sins into incense. And always the witness flame waited for him to return. On his 17th birthday, Calrin was summoned to perform the rite of unshrouding, a sacred act no one had attempted in 80 years. It was done for people who died with unresolved memory, rage, shame, betrayal. If those echoes lingered, they would rot the soil or sicken children. To unshroud a soul meant to find the moment it split from the truth. He was taken to the charred ruins of a schoolhouse burned decades before. 15 children had perished. No clear cause was ever found. Calrin stepped into the ash barefoot. The silence screamed. He closed his eyes and felt the heat of panic, the slow retreat of a locked door, the shame of someone who meant to come back but didn't. He walked through the rooms, naming each fear out loud, and one by one the embers flared and dimmed. In the heart of the ruin, he found an old wax seal, one of his own from years earlier. It bore a broken ring. He whispered, "You are seen. You are not forgotten. Go." And the ash settled. The birds returned. Calrin grew older, quieter. He stopped offering truths unasked. He learned to carry silence with reverence. But when people truly needed to face themselves, he would arrive, sometimes during childbirth, sometimes at executions, sometimes at weddings, just standing in the back. His presence wasn't comfort, it was clarity. He became part of a quiet pilgrimage network, the ash carriers, those who trained to bear witness for the dying, the suffering, the healed. No one ever saw him sleep, but the flame in his eyes never dimmed. He vanished one night during a village fire in a distant town. Witnesses said the flame shifted as he walked in, not away from him, but towards him, like greeting kin. When the blaze died down, no body was found, only a ring of soot with a single golden flame hovering where he'd stood. Since then, a small branch of witness carriers leave candles at disaster sites, not to illuminate the scene, but to honor what was seen. In grief therapy circles, some now speak the old vow. Let no pain pass unseen. Let no truth die unspoken. Let the fire find form through me. And sometimes in the darkened corner of a hospice or a ruined home, a golden flicker appears in the mirror, watching. And that's it for today. Thank you for joining me for Echoes of My Imagination. My name is Tracy Lee. Don't forget to subscribe, share, like, and follow, and I'll catch you next time.